How are you dealing then with the Connecticut Democratic machine, so to speak?
Well, it's interesting
in terms of that, because clearly they seem to be backing Blumenthal.
Yeah, well, and worse, not allowing the discussion to continue because they obviously don't want that. It's interesting. In the last year, roughly 50% of the town committees have refused to allow me the opportunity to speak to their members, and there have been a series of stories.
Can they do that?
Well, they do. It's what's most amazing. I worked for a guy in politics years ago who had a funny line. He said, "It's one thing to be an idiot; it's another thing to brag about it." One of the most amazing things, we actually got an email from one of these town chairs. Literally, this fella just didn't get it, and he literally sent an email because we sent to each of these town chairs. We did a minimum of 2 phone calls, in most cases 3 phone calls, and we sent a minimum 7 pieces of correspondence, 7 written pieces of correspondence. And so, obviously, it's impossible for these people to claim they didn't get notice we're trying to be in front of them. But this chair, I think, spoke quite frankly for a bunch of them and just said, you're not the party-supported candidate, you haven't held office, and you haven't been in office for 20 or 30 years, you don't have a right to run, which is pretty stunning stuff. First of all, grotesquely unconstitutional. The Constitution is very clear. If you've reached the age, if you're a resident of the state, if you're a resident of this nation, obviously all 3 of which I satisfy, you have literally all the right in this nation that the Constitution affords you to run. And so when you listen to these people try to rationalize why they won't let you in the room, pretty amazing. But then you actually watch the debate between myself and Richard Blumenthal, and this is a debate where I clearly laid out a vision. This is a debate where he fumbled and stumbled and was literally could not explain why he was running for the Senate, literally. It then becomes clear why they don't want me in the room, right? Because I'm going to lay out a vision and I'm going to connect with those average members. And so the chairs want to prevent that from happening. So a lot of these people will prevent you from coming in. On the other hand, there have been great people. The town chair in East Lyme, right, is a good example. He's terrific. He said, look, I can't guarantee you that you're going to get the votes of these folks, but I guarantee you have a right to come here the way every candidate does. And when you see things like that, that renews your faith in democracy. Absolutely.
That's certainly fair enough.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, you have to wonder if they've already made up their mind, if the Connecticut Dems have already made up their mind on who they're going to back, then, have you any recourse to, workarounds, other than
it's a great question.
Direct appeal to...
I'm trying to get in front of delegates. That's really what I do each day, is get there in front of those town committees. I was in Meriden last night by way of example, and get in front of the town committee, and a certain number of those folks in the town committee are going to be delegates to that state convention on 22 May. And you make your argument. You make your plea directly to those people. You lay out what you believe in, and you say to them, look, here's how I'm different than the other fella. And you say to people, in the end, you get to decide. But don't act like it's a foregone conclusion, because by definition, if you have no choice and you know who's going to win an election before the election happens, that's not a democracy, right? And one of the things I've conveyed very clearly to people is it would be bitterly ironic that having served as a U.S. peacekeeper overseas in Bosnia to make sure there were free and fair elections, I should come home to my home state and find something other than free and fair elections. And so, my view is you just keep making that case directly in front of folks, because once you're with them, it's a different situation. And these sort of party apparatchiks, who want to keep you out of the room, I think you just say to them, it's Ronald Reagan's great line, I paid for this microphone and I intend to use it. Of course, as with most Ronald Reagan lines, he didn't write it, he took it from a movie.
Right.
What the heck?
No, it's a good line, you may as well.
It is a good line.
Work it.
Yeah.
Well, after that stunning victory over Richard Blumenthal at the debate, at which the New York Times writer David Halbfinger said that Mr. Blumenthal's debate performance exposed his glass jaw, and quoted Connecticut Dem insiders calling Blumenthal Martha Coakley in pants.
That's right. The Coakley, and here's, I tell people in this Senate race, you got to do two things. Google Coakley in pants. It's stunning. Dozens of articles on Blumenthal come up now because that's become his nickname, Coakley in pants.
Really?
And then the other thing you can do is, on a more serious note, you go in and Google dead wrestlers. And you see all of the stories about dead wrestlers, about illegal steroid use in world wrestling, about illegal drug use in world wrestling, about all the violence and injury, and then you realize, Linda McMahon doesn't look so good in that regard. So, you know, I think part of what I've conveyed to folks over the last year is that substance matters, issues matter, people's positions on these things matter. You know, it shouldn't be about just the name recognition. I told folks, for example, last night at a town hall meeting, when I walked in there, I said, look, the question isn't whose name did you know before I walked into this room. The question is, when I leave this room, whose vision do you share? And that's what you have to continue to convey to folks is, look, the issues matter. Issues matter very, very much. And if somebody can simply stand up there and sort of breeze in and breeze out and say, oh, you know, I'm fighting for you, well, what does that actually mean? You know, what does that truly mean? If you're unwilling to take positions on job creation, on meaningful health care reform, on opposing the war in Afghanistan, what is fighting for people really? And those are just words.
Yeah, you're just coasting on your momentum.
That's it.
Well, you know, do you? This may not be a fair question, but do you think that, you know, Blumenthal is capable of winning the seat over Linda McMahon?
No, I don't, and I've conveyed that very clearly to people. I don't. I mean, at the end of the day, the only thing that he has going for him is that people know his name. But at the end of the day, when things come down to actually having an election, you have to be able to explain, why are you running? What do you believe in? How are you more qualified from the other person? Look, the premier issue is always the economy. These career politicians like Blumenthal have never had a private sector job or created a private sector job. They don't get that. They've been sort of recently informed by their pollsters, hey, look, the polling data says that people want to hear you talk about this, so talk about it. But as you saw in the debate, when he talks about it, it's this misconnected jumble of sound bites that he's memorized, that he's been given by a pollster. So it makes no sense. Right? When I talk about it, it's based on a lifetime of first growing up poor, and second of getting out of the military and putting together a successful small business, a software company, and then building that company up and understanding, here's how you make payroll, here's how you hire people, here's how you grow a company, here's how you make sales, here's how you keep costs under control. And I can then say, look, what we're doing makes no sense. We have 174,000 people as of today who are unemployed in the state of Connecticut, right? We have millions and millions of millions unemployed in this nation. We've lost more than 10 million jobs in this recession in this country. So when you look at that, and when you have some politicians stand up there and just give a couple of sound bites, well, we're going to give some tax cuts, or we're going to do, it doesn't mean anything. And I can say from first-hand experience, having successfully grown businesses, when I hear that, I wince, because I realize that's a politician saying something he's been told to say. He has no comprehension of what he's actually saying, let alone the ramifications of it. We're talking about the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. So what I propose is restructuring the priorities of this nation. I mean, right now, last month we spent nearly $5 billion on Afghanistan alone. If you look at the money that we're spending in Afghanistan, on Iraq, if you look at the agricultural subsidies we're spending, whether it's sugar, whether it's ethanol, if you look at the Defense Department budget, you've got nearly $1 trillion budget. As a businessman, the notion I can't go in and reduce that down by a significant amount is preposterous. I mean, I've successfully gone into companies that had 20 million in revenue and been able to figure out how to greatly cut costs. So when I look at $1 trillion budget, I realize, look, overall, what I propose is $200 billion a year, a very large sum to begin rebuilding this country, doing three very specific things. Right? First, investing in education. and including a very significant technical component for vocational school training, because we've got to produce something in this country. I mean, the notion that half our population is going to work at McDonald's and the other half is going to work at a hedge fund is wildly unrealistic. We actually need to make something. The second piece, so if education is the first component of the investment, the second piece is infrastructure. Our roads, our bridges, our ports, our airports, I mean, all that stuff is crumbling. And if you don't invest in that, then obviously it has a horrific return downstream because you haven't focused on your own population.